Good afternoon. Welcome to our latest edition of the Humpday Hangout. This week's Humpday Hangout is your training hangout. I'm your host, Steve Pegram, president of the International Society of Fire Service Instructors and also the fire chief in Goshen, Ohio. And my co-host on with me today is my good friend Aaron Heller from Hamilton Township, New Jersey, District 9 captain. Before we get into this week's training Hump Day Hangout, we just want to send a shout out to the DC Fire and EMS Department. Everybody in Washington, D.C., we're getting information now of a line of duty death there during a high-rise fire. Kevin McRae is the name that we're hearing of the deceased firefighter, and we just want to send out our thoughts and prayers to D.C. Fire and EMS, the McRae family, and everybody involved in that incident. As always, you can follow us if you'd like to send in a question or ask a question of the panel, interact with us while we're live here doing the Hump Day Hangout. Hashtag FETalk. That's hashtag FETalk. You can submit a question, and that will be forwarded to us as we're going through today's Hump Day Hangout. Obviously, we all just got back from FDIC. It was, again, an awesome FDIC in 2015, and we're already looking forward to 2016. If you taught at FDIC and want to teach again, applications are opening right now. They'll start reviewing those here very soon. And if you've never taught at FDIC, but you have something you'd like to share with the fire service, it is the premier training event, and I would encourage you to go to Fire Engineering's website, download the application, submit an application for a class in 2016. So without further ado, I'll go to my partner, Aaron Heller, and he can introduce this week's guest and our topic.
Hi, everybody. As Steve said, my name's Aaron Heller, and I'm a captain in Hamilton Township, New Jersey, still active on a busy engine company there, and I'm fortunate enough to be an FDIC instructor and do quite a bit with fire engineering. And talking about things at FDIC, now that we're home and batteries are big time recharged, ready to go again, this is a great topic to jump into. And it was basically, the talk was, we're getting new guys, how do we integrate them? How do we bring them into the fire service? And how do we make them a part of what we do? And one of the issues that came up was, we've got this concentration of vets coming back, and they have tremendous amounts of experience. They're battle tested, truly battle tested, yet how do we get them to integrate into our fire department and kind of coordinate that with the white collar guys that we have coming in, the college kids, and the others that we have joining our ranks. So through that conversation, it gave me a thought that this was really a good topic that we could cover in Hump Day Hangout. So my first thought of who we would talk to was firefighter E.J. Mascaro from the Charleston Fire Department. Interestingly enough, Bobby Halton talked a little bit about E.J. in his opening remarks at FDIC, and it just really makes sense to me. So I'll introduce you to E.J. E.J.'s background: he started as a volunteer firefighter up near Erie, Pennsylvania. He's a third-generation firefighter and served in the U.S. Army. 5 years, did 2.5 tours in Iraq, some of the highest military honors, including a Purple Heart, a Presidential Unit Citation, the Army Accommodation Medal, and many others. I met E.J. years ago while we were doing some training in Charleston, and he was that young guy who just wanted to soak up every bit of what was being done. And now E.J. is the one doing the training, as he's traveling around the country and helping at a lot of places, helping at FDIC and others. So he's done what we're talking about, and he sees it all the time. And the other neat thing is that E.J. works with a lot of veterans coming home to help them get themselves reorientated and kind of bring themselves back into our world now. So there's E.J. So if you would like to introduce, say hello.
Hey, Aaron, thank you for that introduction. I wish as I'm on the road, I had more people like you to introduce me like that. Very humbling. Yeah, absolutely. I think veterans into the fire services today is a big thing, and I think can be a major positive for us. So I look forward to the discussion as we go on.
Cool. Well, I guess the first thing to bring up is, this isn't the first time the fire service has seen this. Obviously, after World War II, there was an influx of vets coming in, and after Korea and then Vietnam, But this is the first time that really the last couple generations of firefighters have seen this. So the guys who saw it before are, for the most part, on the very end of their careers or have already retired. So for us, this is a new challenge to us. And now I guess one of the things is to ask you, what do you see as some of the obstacles in these guys reorienting to us? Oh, EJ, come back. What are the things about them reorienting to us, and then the dynamic of everybody interacting together? Are we there, EJ?
Aaron, I think we lost him, but I think we'll get him back in a second. Totally agree with what you started off and talking about, and EJ as well. You know, when you talk to a lot of firefighters that served in like New York City during the war years, they referred to it. A lot of those were guys that were vets and got hired in the early 70s from Vietnam and stuff like that. And I've always found it interesting that the difference between someone who has served in the military versus somebody who just comes straight out of high school or even straight out of college. And the best way I can describe it is they seem to have a little bit better work ethic. The other one we see in Southwest Ohio, where I'm at, is kids that grew up on a farm.
Right.
Very similar. You know, they understand how to use a chainsaw and how to fix a motor and things like that. And we've sort of lost some of that those skills over time. But I think it's pretty interesting because there's a lot of countries that require military service. Obviously, we're still a volunteer army. We're a volunteer military. But I went to high school with a kid who was from Israel.
Right.
And upon graduating high school, he had to return and serve his period of time before he could go on and go to college and do everything else. And I've always thought that was an interesting process. And you hear from people that have served in the military or now as a chief who has several veterans working for him, I can tell you that there's a distinct difference in just the general work ethic, professional appearance, their conduct, and stuff like that. And it really is what we're looking for when we're recruiting firefighters. They just seem to have that little bit more than everybody else.
Exactly, and that's what I found too. Hey, welcome back, EJ.
Hey, how are you?
But that's what I found too, and the thing that I look at that they can bring to us, number one is the battle-tested skills that they've already had, but they bring forth discipline, and that can be a really good thing for some of our younger members to look up to, and even some of our older members to come back to, because the military brought them discipline, and that's something that a lot of firehouses seem to be lacking more and more of as you look around and you see some of the kind of the scandals and little things that go on that really shouldn't be going on. So I look at it as they can really lead from the bottom up, so to speak, as probies.
Yep.
So EJ, what can you tell us about, you know, when we go into this?
I think what veterans are looking for is they've done their time, they've served their country, and for whatever reason, you know, they're getting out. And I think why veterans are trying to join the police departments and the fire departments is because, number one, they're giving back. It's still in that little environment, and number two, I mean, I hate to say it, but it's the adrenaline. You know, we are a little bit of adrenaline junkies, just like the fire and police, and we want to be part of a team, and that's, I think, more important than anything else. Is we're leaving a team aspect, we're leaving a group or a unit or whatever to where you truly relied on your fellow brother, and the fire service has that same thing. So I think it's a no-brainer for any veteran to try to jump into the fire service. I think that's why we're seeing that influx. And I agree with you. Veterans, they might not gone to college or had, you know, a certain technical skill that gives the fire service, you know, like an IT environment or something like that, but they do come in with that that background of, you know, a leadership.
Well, you froze, EJ.
Hopefully we get him back in a second, Aaron. But just to hit on that topic or that comment that he just made, I mean, you're an engine company boss, so obviously you're a leader in your organization by default of your position. You know, you probably have some young guys riding the back step with you. What do you think they look for in a leader? Since he's talking about leadership, and a guy coming out of the military obviously has experienced some very well-trained leaders. And what do you think the firefighters that you're seeing, the younger firefighters are seeing? What are they looking for?
I think what we find with them is they want somebody to show them the steps, show them where they're going, and show them where they need to be, and really draw them a roadmap as to where they need to go. And as an officer, through training is how we do that. And also just sitting at the kitchen table talking about what we expect from our people. And it's funny because you'll get the guys who are talking about the other company. Oh, they don't do this or they don't do that. Well, what would you expect for them to do? And then kind of work them into the fabric of what we do and why we do it. So as a boss, they want to see somebody who, number one, knows their craft, somebody who is willing to listen to them, which when I came on, the bosses weren't always willing to listen to you as the young guy. And I've had to make adjustments to that, because I can say there's been days where I looked at them and went, okay, I'm the boss. You're the young guy. We're going to do it my way. Stop asking that question. But we all have to adjust to that, because it is unfortunately or fortunately, however you look at it, it is a different level of people that are coming in the fire service. Like you said, where you're at, you get the farm kids, you get the guys who have really worked with their hands. Today I had a fellow who was my probie for a while, who had a degree in music education. So I joked that he had to play revelry when he came to work in the morning, but he turned out to be a hell of a fireman. But it took time to mentor him for him to be there.
Well, and I think we heard it at FDIC. There was a big theme this year of the importance of the instructor. And obviously this is a training hump day hangout, and I think all of us would agree that the title instructor does not mean a rank in an organization. It means whoever you are and below you, or craft you've perfected. As we're talking training and stuff like that, I mean, I know we're talking a little bit about the younger generation. What's your guys' feeling on the technology? Because what I constantly hear is that the younger generation thrives on technology, wants more technology, but what I'm seeing in the firehouse is they're much more interested in pulling hose, doing live burns, and cutting up cars than they are sitting in front of a computer.
Yeah, I think that's true. I think they might, although they can introduce us to a lot of technology, maybe they're a little tired of it because that's all they've been doing.
Yeah.
So I think that's a great mix. That really is. EJ, I see you're back.
Yeah, and to answer Chief's question, I agree. What I found in our department is when we deliver good hands-on training, morale is through the roof. The guys are on a high. And this is a 375-man department. And they just want good quality training, stretching some lines. We just finished a high-rise drill, RIT training, and the guys are completely on a high. They don't want to sit in a firehouse and do all that stuff on a computer. Yeah, when weather dictating and everything, but the guys are just energized. It re-energizes them.
Well, here's a question for you. When we bring vets into the firehouse, and we've got some college kids that have come through the training academy, and we're bringing vets in, and we've got our older, saltier guys that are already in a firehouse, I seem to see that the vets can actually have a positive influence even on our oldest members, because I think they bring something that maybe we've been lacking, or maybe our older members were those vets years ago and are now going to be re-energized a little bit by these younger vets coming up. Do you see any of that, EJ? Oh, you're killing me. We froze again. Well, EJ's having definite troubles down there. I don't know. It's but Chief, what do you think about that? That maybe that's something that brings a new life to the station.
Well, absolutely. I think that the biggest thing I see is if there's a couple of guys on the shift or in the firehouse that work together and they've gotten maybe a little bit lackadaisical, as everyone does at different points, but I think we all see it. You know, you see the younger person, the new person is real gung-ho at the very beginning, but they hit that point where they sort of plateau. And some people get there in 6 months, some it takes 18 months, but they kind of lose a little bit that motivation. They think that they've earned something in the organization, and then the next new person comes in. And I've seen it, especially if that next new person has some military background or maybe came from the volunteer fire service, or as I talked about, grew up on a farm, or somebody who has just a little bit more of an edge when it comes to a work ethic. It motivates the entire crew because nobody wants to be shown up or shown down by the new kid or the new guy. And in fact, we were talking about it at lunch today at the firehouse a little over an hour ago. The rookie on the shift left the room before everybody was done eating, and the conversation around the table was, is he going to come back to do the dishes?
That's right.
And they looked at the next youngest guy, and they said, you're on deck. And sure enough, a few minutes later, the guy came in, and he jumped right into the sink. But I think we've all saw that where some of the younger generation just get up and walk away from the table. And I don't think that's necessarily their fault. I know that some of the older generation, and it's sort of strange for me to talk about the older generation, and now it's you and me, Aaron. But we're now hiring firefighters that were born when I was a company officer, and but what I've seen is that in a lot of cases they just don't know.
Right.
What my mom and dad taught me in the 1970s is different than what moms and dads are teaching in the 1990s. And not saying that that's good or bad, but there's a change. And we as company officers, we as chief officers, we as trainers, instructors, mentors need to realize that they may be getting up and walking away from the table and not cleaning up their mess just because they don't know any better. And it's not that they're doing something wrong, it's that we haven't trained them, and we need to get back to the basic skills. And you hear about it, and maybe if we get EJ back, we can talk a little bit about, from what I've heard, I've never served in the military, I've got a lot of family that has, and I have the utmost respect for all of them and what they do for our country. But when you talk to people that served in the military, they will drill down their training to the point where this is a mop. This is how you fill a bucket of water. This is how you put the mop in the bucket. This is how you mop a floor. And I think we forget that sometimes, that just because we're hiring a kid off the street who scored really high on the test, or a guy who has a bachelor's degree in whatever, even fire science, they may not know how to do the basic chores around the firehouse, let alone start a chainsaw.
Right.
And things like that. And I think that's where the instructor, the mentors, I really think that all of us need to be thinking about mentoring, and that's a big part of this younger generation, is we forget to mentor the younger generation in what it means to be a firefighter as a whole, not just what they need to know to ride out on the engine.
Yeah, it's true, and I agree completely with that. I don't think that they want to do things that are spiting us in the firehouse. I think they just probably don't understand it yet, and they've never been in that environment. They always had somebody to clean up for them at school or at home or whatever the case was, and now they have to step into that role, and that's why a lot of departments now with mentoring programs, I think, are doing the right thing by having somebody who's been there and is a little seasoned and is willing to explain all the nuances of firehouse life to them. And I have a friend who came on the job in Philadelphia a few years back, and I saw a definite change in him. And he had already been on the job another place and understood the fire service very well. But it was more than just what we did at fires. It was more than even just what you did in the firehouse. It was the fire department life in general. When you have somebody who's sick and their wife is sick and needs a ride to the hospital, you're off duty, you offer to give the ride, and that sort of thing. And I think that training has probably been lacking. And but I do see other departments where it's starting to come back, and we're starting to mentor our people a little better that way.
Yeah.
EJ just texted me that he's bringing up another computer, so hopefully he'll be right back with us.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, I'll just stay on the mentoring topic just for a second, and want to remind our listeners and people that watch this later on in the archive that mentoring is more than just on duty at the firehouse, during the fire, during the training event, things like that. but it's also being concerned about their personal well-being. And I think we all realize at a certain point that our relationships at home, our kids, our school, all the other things that are gnawing at us and pulling us in different directions can have an effect on our work performance and how well we do at work and what our mood is at work and stuff like that. And I know Chief Halton has a lot of passion on the firefighter suicide issue. And I think another thing for our company officers, trainers, and mentors to remember is the importance of making sure that we're talking to these people not just about fighting fire and not just about what their duties and responsibilities are, but how's life? You know, how's things at home? You want to be able to open that conversation so that they feel comfortable to talk to you about proficiency on the fire ground, but they're also comfortable to talk to you about the problem at home that might be affecting their ability to do their job.
And you know, that goes on both ends of it, because from a personal aspect, I've faced a bunch of personal upheaval in the last year, and but one of the first things I did was on my first shift back after it, was to sit down with my guys and tell them what was going on, and tell them where I was coming from. So if I was a little short with them when I shouldn't be, or you know, I spaced out for a second while we were sitting at the kitchen table, you know, or something triggered something, that they understood what was causing it. Yep. And I think that was it was very difficult to do, but it was important to do, and I think that they respected that. At least I hope they did.
Yeah, we throw around the word brotherhood all the time, and we don't necessarily act like brothers too often.
Not all the time. Not all the time. Yep.
I agree with that statement.
Yeah. Well, it's good that you're back. You got another computer up and running?
It's booting up now. I have to hardwire. This Mac is killing me.
Well, let's go back if we can. You know, because with you here, EJ, I want to get that younger guy's take. Not that you're that much younger than us. You know, Steve and I aren't that old, but
right.
But you're probably you're the generation right behind us anyway. But you know, again, some of the things that the military guys are bringing, and things that you brought to the table in your firehouse, was the energy and the camaraderie part of it, because you got that. But there's other things that we have to deal with when these guys come in too, and you know, one of the things I've actually written a couple articles about is kind of the bravado and ego that we have in the fire service, and even some of the arrogance that we portray at times. And a lot of guys see military guys coming back as having the chip, being a little cocky. You know, I see that as a good thing in many ways, but it can also probably hold guys back a little bit and cause a rub in the station too.
Yeah, it's what I think is the guys that are coming into the fire service don't know. They don't know. That what they know is it's a team type of career, which is exactly what they're leaving, and they just need to be educated. Somebody needs to talk to them, put them underneath their wing. It's not going to take a whole lot, but you got to tell the guys. They already know going through boot camp. Hey, you're scrubbing the toilets. Hey, you're mopping the floors. Hey, they know that. They get that. But
I guess he's got to get that other computer booted up.
I apologize to everyone for their technical problems today.
Yeah. Well, you know what? I just got a text from a friend of mine who's on the job in a pretty big city in Pennsylvania, and he says, I agree with what you guys are saying about military personnel. He said, but the other problem that sometimes we see is that they feel that because they're vets and they serve, they may be owed something. And he said they've had that problem in their department where they had to get them to step up and be a better part of it all. So that could be the negative to it, sure.
That could be a negative. I haven't personally experienced that, but I could see that happening. And I would think, you know, to put the fire service analogy, kind of like if somebody's a chief and they switch departments and become a firefighter or become a captain or something like that, and you know, the people get confused on where their role is and what their responsibility is sometimes. But yeah, I could see that being an interesting factor. My personal opinion, in my department, if I had that situation, I would try to embrace that person as and utilize whatever strengths that they had to mentor the other employees or share with the other employees, kind of build them up. If they have something to share, if they have a particular area of expertise, turn them into a trainer, into an instructor on that topic, so that they're seen more as a peer, but they also get excited maybe about sharing the knowledge, skills, and abilities that they have that they bring from the military.
Right. I agree. And one thing that I think you have to understand too, some of our younger personnel might be a little more intimidated by military guys coming in, because they might feel that they're challenged because, hey, I was here, now this guy just came in, but he's got all this battlefield experience and everything else. So I think that integration is going to definitely take time, and each situation is a little different between personalities. But I think that as company officers and instructors, we have to understand that integrating these folks into what we've already been doing for all these years might take a little time. EJ, you look like you're up with the other computer, and it looks a lot more clear. You there, man?
Yes. I think I'm actually having a true internet issue within the whole area.
Oh, okay. So I shouldn't make a joke about the South being
so. No, it could be the internet. Yeah, it's running a little slow. Typical.
A little more laid back down there.
Hey, they'll rise again. All right. Yeah.
So I don't know if you heard us, EJ, but we were talking about integrating guys.
If you were to take.
Go ahead.
I think if you were to take a veteran, what I like about what's happening in the fire service is you can take a veteran that has gone to combat, has fought, and then you take, say that the kid or the Joe the plumber, so to speak, that hasn't found where they want to be. You put them both together, and I think they offset each other extremely well. And more than important, they're able to bond themselves together. Because you have the kid that is either right out of college or right out of high school that has no life experience. But you can attach him to that vet, and now you have a true team. And that all has to start with the company officer. That all, to make that happen, it's not going to be done in this, let's get these guys in, let's get certified, let's get them moving. I think it's the company officer has to bring everyone in together and tie everybody in together. He has to be the center of everything.
Yeah, I agree.
Does that sound good?
Yeah, it does, EJ. I agree that you've got it. The company officer has to be the pivotal person involved in this, whether it's on the drill ground or it's sitting at the kitchen table, if it's just out front doing truck checks. I think that it all starts with that person and that leadership, and the dynamic has to be that company officer has to find a way in which to get these folks motivated together. And once you do that, that usually works out pretty well for the company. Chief?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we say it 1,000 times, probably on every topic we talk about, but the company officer is the critical link between the success of the organization, the success of the company, the success on the fire ground, the success on the drill ground, but more importantly, the success of the individuals on that crew. If you have an absent or asleep at the wheel company officer, you can't expect good results in any of those areas. And so, obviously all that responsibility falls on those lieutenants and captains or whatever makeup your department has for company officers. Huge amount of responsibility. And we also need to remember, we're talking about the younger generation, but we also have to remember that we're mentoring the new company officers for that transition to a leadership position as well. Because the young guys that came in 5 years ago are starting to test for lieutenant in a lot of places.
Yeah. I know here in New Jersey with civil service, once you have 3 years in the position of firefighter, you can test for promotion. So literally, we can have a 4-year person riding that front right seat as a company officer, which is, to me, is a little frightening. You know, some guys, they work in a busy place, they see tons of fire, and they're very skilled, and okay, maybe they're ready. But I think that's not. I think that's really the minority. I really do.
Yep.
I think it takes time. I know where I work, I had 10 years on the job before I was an officer. So you know, that's, and I felt at that point I was just about ready to do it. So
now I'm seeing 3 EJs.
Yeah. All right. Let me stop this one. I resorted to my phone.
Well, keep it on you. Again, sorry about the technical issues, but we'll get through them here.
All right, how are we looking?
Okay, we see your ceiling fan and part of your face. We're doing great. There you go.
There we go.
There we go. So one other thing that hit me a little bit is you're seeing more and more reports of vets coming home with probably undiagnosed traumatic brain injuries, things of that nature, things that could get, they might be able to get by in the fire department physical and get on the job. And now we have to take that into consideration as well. Is that something that you see, or is that a concern that we have?
I think it's a concern. I think it's something we're going to see, but I think with proper screening, as far as, you know, psych evals or anything like that, I think that is going to help the fire service and help your organization not get a veteran that, and I hate to say this, but you know, we are trying to get out and follow a certain career and everything like that, but we're just ultimately we're not fit. You know, some of the veterans just aren't fit for the fire service or the police department, and they need more help because we have a lot. In just my personal experience, what I've done with some guys is they haven't found yet that they needed help, and it took them some time. Am I still on?
You're still here, yep.
Okay. It took them some time to figure out they needed the help they need. So there are some issues that, you know, every guy's going to come with, from mild all the way up to, you know, the top when it comes to the PTSD and the TBI. With TBI, the biggest thing that as any organization needs to understand with TBI, and I will speak on my behalf of myself because I've been diagnosed with TBI, is there is some memory damage there. So if you're going over to the rig with a new guy and he's kind of forgetting it, certain things at times, it's not because he's being lazy. He might just forget. You know, it takes time to go over it and go over things. And the latest article I was reading with Veterans Health was that with the new veterans that are coming out, you know, we in combat rely solely on a lot of muscle memory. The way we go to clear rooms, the way we shoot our weapon, from safe to fire to everything else. So, you know, when, you know, Chief, you talk about stretching lines and more hands-on, well, maybe that guy needs to do it 4 or 5 times to finally get it and to build that muscle memory. But I think ultimately that's the way we want the fire service to be going anyway, right?
Yeah, it sounds to me like, and what I've heard from military training is repetition, repetition, repetition.
Yep.
And we hear the same thing in successful and unsuccessful training programs in the fire service. We did get a Twitter question from a friend of Aaron and I, Anthony Correa out of New Jersey, and he was wondering if you had any type of conversation, EJ, specifically with the people in Charleston when you started there about your military background or any of that sort of stuff, and how that was that an issue for them? Was it an issue for you? How did that blending when you first got there occur, or was it a non?
The guys would ask me, my first assignment, the guys asked me, what's my background, and doing the feeler, just like what all of us do.
Yep.
And I told them, hey, I was in, the Army, and I said, exactly what was going on, and the guys were very, very receptive to it. They were, I didn't have any problems, and I've had some other veterans come to my company and say, that have said, hey, I was a Marine, I was in the Army, and we just say thank you for your service, and they've actually all ended up being really good guys, disciplined good guys.
Yep. Cool. Absolutely. Well, thanks, Anthony, for that question.
One of the other things, EJ, that I was thinking about too is the guy comes in and he's fine. And he's made it through academy no problem, because obviously our academies are not nearly as difficult as boot camps normally, but then something happens on a fire ground that might trigger it, that brings it all back. And I mean, we've all been through some of that just as firefighters. I know I've been on calls that it triggered something that maybe I saw on a call 20 years ago that was probably something we should have talked about, but back then we certainly didn't do it. So is that something that company officers can kind of be on the lookout for to help this person and to make them, make sure that we keep them in our fold once we've gotten them in our fold? Because once we've brought a vet or any of our guys, a young guy, a college kid who's never worked in a dangerous field and never seen some of the gruesome stuff that we may encounter, that happens, and now we as officers, a lot of times we don't have anything other than saying, okay, send them to EAP. We'll send them to an employee assistance program. Have you seen that, or is that something that maybe fire officers and chief officers and administrative folks should be looking to inaugurate or integrate into the fire service?
Yeah, I think it all depends. When we're talking about veterans, there's thousands and thousands and thousands of veterans that serve in different jobs, different branches of service. I don't want to speak on behalf of all the guys that actually served in combat, on patrols, were shot at, blown up, and all that. I think those guys have been a little more numb. Whether it's a pin job that was a little gruesome to I have a good example of not that long on the job is me and another guy and two other guys. There's 4 of us total that were newer to Charleston, and it was a mother and 2 twin boys. It was a triple fatality, and there were some guys busted up at the scene, and they had every right to be, but the veterans, our little group, we looked at each other and we're like, that's the cost of doing business, because of what we were exposed to over there. We've become a little more numb compared to the 2 other guys have never seen it, never been exposed to it. They were really shaken up about it. As far as triggering the PTSD, there's so many triggers out there, and it goes, I think, the same for the fire service. Especially, I've seen some things with, my own department and what's triggered guys that you would never think of. So I don't know if we can actually pinpoint something, but if your company officer is a true leader and not a manager and is hanging out with his guys and knowing his guys and learning his guys, then he'll be able to tell if that firefighter or chauffeur or whatever is off a little bit. He's not on his game after that call, or he gets quiet when he's normally chit-chatty and everything else.
EJ, you bring up a great point and highlight Aaron's comment that kicked it off. We recently suffered a fire fatality on a working house fire, and just not something you experience in our neck of the woods a whole lot. And but what was unique about this fire is the entire engine crew were probationary or just off of probationary employees. So one guy on the search crew, literally, it was his first fire ever. Another guy, he's probably been to 2 or 3 fires, but never had a report of entrapment or anything like that. And the other gentleman was new with our department, had a few years' experience, probably dealt with it before. But what was interesting and what you're talking about is you could see the burden of that fire and the result of the fire. They did nothing wrong. They did everything could for the victim. They got the victim out, transported the victim to the hospital with ALS on board, within 5 minutes of getting him out the back door. The gentleman just didn't survive. And that happens sometimes. But nobody had that slide in their slide tray. Nobody had ever experienced that before. And you could see it in their facial expressions and things like that. The day of the fire came in right at shift change. So they still had 23 hours and 58 minutes left in the shift when all was said and done. But the other thing is, a day later, two shifts later, a week later, we noticed, myself, a couple of the company officers, that they still had that look, kind of that mopey, weren't themselves, like exactly what you were just talking about. And again, going back to the responsibility of the company officers, but also the chief officers, but also the fellow firefighters, especially the senior firefighters, is to notice that behavioral change. It may have something to do with the job. It may have something to do with at home. But we need to make sure that we identify that behavioral change, and we don't need to call them out and have a shift meeting and sit everybody around, because we all know that firemen aren't necessarily going to sit around the kitchen table and bleed their aching hearts to everybody else. But a one-on-one behind the firehouse, a one-on-one in an office, a one-on-one, while you're fueling up the truck at the gas station, just, how you doing, how you feeling, blah, 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 really goes a long way. And one of our guys that was involved in that line of duty, or the fire fatality, recently nominated one of the company officers for an award. And the reason why he nominated him is because after that fire, the guy just checked in with him on the day off, gave him a phone call and said, hey, how you doing? What's going on? You doing okay? And I think going back to, we've said it a few times today on the Humpday Hangout, but going back to just making sure that taking care of our own and each other is a lot more than just the 12-hour shift or the 24-hour shift or the 4-hour drill night or whatever the case may be. And it's everybody's responsibility.
I think I'll tell you, I got two experiences, and I learned this before I left for the military as I was a junior fireman. Some of the best conversations I've ever had with my dad or, with other guys is on the front bumper of the fire truck, looking at traffic as it passed or whatever, and talking about life. My unit on my second tour, it was the hardest hit Army unit since Vietnam. We lost 32 guys in one tour. We did a lot of damage control. I had troops checking out, ultimately, mentally checking out in the middle of combat. And one thing I was able to do with the guys is, every couple days and nights is we would sit on the front of the Humvee and talk and just, after every killed in action soldier, you get pulled out of combat, you get sent. There's counselor, it's a round table, and the chaplain's there, and they want to talk to you, and you're supposed to spill your guts, and these people are in pristine uniforms, and we're in not good uniforms. We just lost one of our own, and the probably best counseling we had was us, the sergeants, the corporals, the staff sergeants in front of a Humvee, either right before going on a mission or just coming back and just talking. How you doing? It worked both ways. I had a private come talk to me. He could see it on my face when I lost one of my guys. Hey, how are you? What's up, Sarge? All that. So it is, like you said, Chief. It is two-way street. But if you don't know your people and you aren't taking care of them, you're going to miss it. You're going to miss it.
Yep.
Well, and you know, one of the things that I think of as we go back to our topic for this Hump Day Hangout, you know, because Steve and I are focused on the training portion of Hump Day Hangouts, is that I think we pick a lot of this stuff up through our training. I really truly do. That when I'm with my guys, it's one thing, but when I'm out on the drill ground with them, or I'm on the engine room floor, and we're talking about what we're doing procedurally and practically, and how we're stretching this line or how we're doing it, I, as a company officer, should know how they're reacting to things. And when I go to a fire, I know my crew, and even the guys I overtime with usually, I know their normal behavior, and I know their normal performance levels. So a good company officer is going to pick this out during training as well, where watch what they do, watch what their body language is and how they do things. And if there's at least in my estimation of it, if you see a change in that, that's something that you have to pay attention to right away. And especially when we're bringing these guys in, you know, we're bringing vets into our family. That's something that we need to pay attention to, and it's something that some of our younger members who went on to college and just came back right out and got on the list and got hired, they may not understand that. So we have to use kid gloves in dealing with it, I think, if that makes sense, as a company officer and a training officer.
Yep. Hey guys, we got one more question from Twitter from Bill Carey, and he was wondering ways would an officer address risk-taking behavior that comes from a veteran, especially a combat veteran, versus a firefighter that doesn't have that background. And I guess I've never experienced that in my organization, but do you see someone who maybe has a combat veteran background being a little bit more of a risk taker, and as a company officer, how would you deal with that?
Yeah, I think, yes. We are, if a guy, I think most guys that served in combat, and we're more apt to take risks, and I think we're more apt to jump into it. You know, stretch that line out, start hitting stretching down that hallway and all that. You got to dial them in. As a company officer, you have to dial them in, and I think that's easy because we're already brainwashed that way. Is if Bill, the company officer, has someone like me, and he says, "Hey, you're not going in that front door till I do my 360. When I get done doing my 360, I'm going to meet you here, and then we're going in together." He's going to do that. When we cleared rooms and cleared houses, it was the same way. You know, that you didn't go just jumping in, kicking in doors or breaching doors till you had your sarge with you, and your sarge, or you got the order by your sarge, "Hey, go clear that building." So I think it just has to be communicated. You have to say, "Hey, you're not going to do this unless you do it." But what's nice about that is when you build your confidence within that crew, you can rely, as that company officer, start relying and saying, "Hey, I know what you guys are going to do now. You know, if you're on the engine, I now know I've trained and trained and trained to where I know EJ Mascaro is going to get off that truck. I don't need to tell him to stretch that line and not go in. He's going to get off, stretch the line, and wait for me to go in." But you have to communicate that, and that's part of the drilling aspect. Is you have to talk about that. We would run missions after missions, and we always had intel what we were going to do, and we practiced in intel. So as a sergeant, or relating it into the fire service, we knew each other's steps, but we trained on each other's steps. So I didn't move till he moved. And it can be easily related to the fire service. I think with something like that is what he's talking about. That's a gem, because eventually you aren't going to have to worry about him. You might have to worry about someone else or something else, and he's going to have that trouble solutions behind him. So if that line doesn't come out right, or that chauffeur accidentally charges the wrong line, he's going to already be thinking on his toes. But you have to train on it.
It's a great question. It was a great question by Bill. So, it comes back. One of the things that I wrote down when I was preparing for this was I wrote discipline, 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 because at times I know when I was a younger fireman I had no discipline, and I needed the older firemen to put their boot where it belonged for me to square myself up. And I don't know, maybe today there's some chiefs who feel the same thing when I go to their fires, but that is really the key. That I think another thing they bring to us, and they can bring as an example to our younger folks, and even some of our older folks who may have gotten off course, is a disciplined company. And when I teach engine company, I talk about a disciplined company knows how to stretch their line. They know when that they're going to chalk their doors. They know they're chasing their kinks. That seems to play into what you're saying right now, EJ.
Yeah, absolutely.
And the key component is the training.
That's it. If you are not training and you get somebody into the company and you aren't, especially a veteran, they're more than likely not going to know what to do. And I'll be the first one, because they're going to be waiting for that order. They're going to be wanting to know what steps. That's just the way we're washed. And I pick on Marines a lot, number one, because I live in Marine country, but that's exactly how a Marine will risk his life for another in a snap of a finger, because that's how they're trained. But if we aren't training and taking a new guy that's just come to the company, that's a veteran that has something to bring to the table, and you just say, all right, put your stuff on the rig, this is how we do it. Okay. But don't expect him and don't hold him accountable when he does show up on that fire and he's not going to know what he's going to do, and then you're going to be like, oh, this stupid veteran, he didn't know what he did. No, that's actually your fault.
Yeah. EJ, a question that popped into my mind is, with your military background and also your fire service background, there might be people watching this that are volunteer firefighters, part-time firefighters, looking to get into this as a career, but also have that military background. What advice do you have for them? What advice do you have maybe also for a chief officer like myself to help recruit military veterans? Who would we talk to? What would be the best way to do that to get the word out that this is a viable career and probably a good fit for people?
I know the VA has a job hotline, and I'm active with it down here in the Charleston area. We're one of the fastest growing cities on the East Coast right now, and we have several departments within the area between Charleston, Myrtle Beach, Hilton Head area that are hiring, and they give veterans preference. They don't give you 5% or whatever like it is up north, but they have veterans preference. The VA is a big one. VA job hotline or jobs career whatever is a big one that will help get veterans in. A lot of veterans. I always tell veterans, when you get out, one of the first things you should be doing is going to the VA. Going to get checked out, get yourself a system ready. You deserve that. You fought for that right. And they help you with career. They'll help you with building a resume. They'll help you with interviews. Practice interviews. They'll help you with all that. And then they'll, some places will have people like myself that will help you prepare for a firefighter interview or talk to you more about the firefighting career.
Does it make sense to maybe for fire administrators who are looking for these folks and in the recruiting process to even go to the American Legions and the VFWs and the things of that nature? Would that be something we should reach out to possibly, or at least tell them, hey, if you know guys, here's our options?
Yeah, absolutely.
Even for the volunteer fire companies, because we talk a lot about it in the career stuff because we are career guys, but we've all come from the volunteers. Steve and I met; we were both volunteer fire chiefs, and I still have a huge heart for the volunteer fire service. It makes up more of the country than the career does, and man, the volunteer fire service is struggling for members, and maybe that's another way. Steve, do you think?
Yeah, I absolutely do, and that's sort of where I was going with it. That we probably don't do our due diligence in seeking out. We're still awaiting everybody. We got so used to people knocking on our door
Right.
On Thursday night. We had drill on Thursday night, and it was almost every Thursday night there were 2 or 3 new faces hanging out that were friends of somebody else that were on the department that wanted to join. And, you know, our biggest problem is we didn't have enough gear, we didn't have enough pagers, and we didn't have enough place to hang gear on the back wall. And like you, Aaron, no longer in the volunteer fire service, but still have a lot of friends that are still doing it and still very active. And, you know, the diminishing number of people, and I think this may be, in a lot of places, an untapped resource where, you know, some of these military veterans, especially ones that have come from a combat background, they may be looking for a little bit of an adrenaline outlet that they've lost, and that might help them reacclimate to, you know, living stateside. I think it could be a huge asset to the volunteer fire service. And I know the SAFER program that gives money for hiring, recruitment and retention of volunteers, and also hiring career firefighters, they now give preference to programs that support and hire veterans. So even the federal government has identified that that's an asset that we should be looking at and that they will support with federal dollars.
Yeah, I think that's it. I mean, I would love to know the number of veterans that are sitting home right now that are just looking to get involved into that team aspect and could be answering the pager right now. Could be going down to the firehouse, you know, taking care of the rig or, you know, getting the training that they need to be a volunteer. I would say there's probably thousands of guys right now. And you know, if the people that are watching this, if they're in, you know, say Fayetteville, North Carolina, or down here that run volunteer firehouses, there's soldiers right now that would love to volunteer, you know, at nights and on the weekends or whatever. They just don't know how. So I think just it's maybe put a flyer out, social media, whatever. Talk to your local VA, your VA outlet, and see what you can do as far as getting more dialed in. But Chief, you hit the nail on the head there. That's an untapped resource, big time.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, Chief, I know we're getting towards the end here, and it's time for us to start wrapping it up. But I can tell you I really enjoyed today. Again, I think the topics that we're hitting on have true value in the fire service, and I think that these are things that can be expanded on, whether it's by a guy like EJ or other great vets that we have. I know there's a lot of vets who are out there teaching and who are major integral parts of their departments, and these are the things that we need to spread the word. And this is just one outlet that we were very blessed that we can. But I appreciate the time, and EJ, I really appreciate you taking the time to come on with us, and thanks for getting your technical stuff squared away. And you know, how can we get a hold of you? You want to, Steve? I guess we could throw up EJ's contact information later.
Absolutely.
But I really appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. EJ, thank you for your service, especially to our country. We probably underestimate the value of our military in protecting our freedoms that we enjoy every day. And so to you and all military veterans, and thank you. It really is important. And, you know, later this month is Memorial Day, and I hope that everybody goes out and does the right thing, flies their flag, and supports whatever Memorial Day services are going on in their community. And remember that Memorial Day is about celebrating the loss of those that have served, not just a picnic and a holiday for us to get a day off from work. So again, thank you, EJ, and all the military veterans. As we wrap up this Hump Day Hangout, we just again want to send out our thoughts and prayers to the DC Fire and EMS on their line of duty death this morning. I'm sure we'll get some more information. We'll post on Facebook and Twitter some contact information for EJ. And also, Aaron and I would love to hear from you as what you'd like to see as future topics. We'll be on here the first Wednesday of the month, every month, talking about training. So Aaron and I can be reached through fireengineering.com, and also we're both on Facebook. We'll be back again on June 3rd. That's the next first Wednesday of the month, and we look forward to talking to you then. So I think that's it. We're a wrap.
That's it.
Thank you.